Hello everyone, this is part 2 of my Azur Lane summary series. If you are unfamiliar with the story of AL up to the full scales, or just want to see a towering monument to my hubris, go watch part 1. If you are caught up, or just don't care, let us continue. Long in the past, the great sage invites Nagato and Musashi to the sanctuary of the Prime Sakura. A great darkness has been sealed inside, and the seal must be renewed to keep it contained. They enter its secret grotto, and Nagato interfaces with the Watatsumi buried within. The Shadow of Corruption attacks, and Nagato powers up Musashi's sword to defeat it, getting heavily injured in the process. She seals herself in a sacred sakura to heal, leading a naval exercise to determine her successor. She now inherits the sage's dream powers. Also, the commander rises a rock. This is important. Back in the present, Nagato and Musashi notice the withering in the sacred sakuras and return to the Prime Sakura's grotto to begin a ritual to re-strengthen the seal. Owari has been having nightmares and is beckoned to the seal, inadvertently breaking it and sending a wave of black mist to attack the fleet stationed at the outpost there. The fleet attempts to regroup with Musashi, but is overwhelmed, however they get teleported out by the sage. Much like Owari, who had met up with Suiho after she got separated in the initial attack. The sage goes to fight alone. Nagato leads Musashi to the others and gives her a talisman, while she begins the main part of the ritual. The sage is getting pushed back by the Shadow of Corruption, but she is saved by Shimanto, who bestows upon her a rigging made by Musashi, and the sage reclaims her identity as Unzen. They are joined by Ibuki and fight the Shadow, until only Unzen is left standing. Drawing on the power of the Prime Sakura and the wishes of the Sakurians through the interconnected sacred sakuras, she defeats the Shadow, its cause attempted escape halted by the newly reformed seal. Yamato possesses a child to tell Nagato that shit's about to get fucked. Back over in the Sea of Stars, Princeton and Laffy arrive and head to the rigging design department to simulate the latter's Type 2 rigging. They defeat the same fleet the commander faced in an exercise and move on to a tougher opponent, simulating Arbiter the Devil 15. Meanwhile, Guam and Constellation attend a meeting for a data salvage mission. The former enters a portal with Flasher and Louisville in tow, and end up at a simulation of the Battle of Coral Sea. The simulation begins to break down as they near the objective, but they persevere and place an analysing beacon. Constellation congratulates them for a job well done, ordering them to come back for the next investigation. When questioned on her desperate haste, she terminates the connection and goes alone with San Jacinto going along. In the reality lens, they find an uncharacteristically active crown singularity. As they begin to question it, a black tornado appears, sending the Sea of Stars into crisis mode as a hostile program tries to invade. A tornado also appears during Laffy's battle, and the Devil's vessel comes alive and gives them escape coordinates, where they meet up with Guam's team. Having also experienced something similar, they reunite with Constellation. They search their surroundings, finding it completely desolate, and Flasher fishes up a strange beacon, giving off similar readings to the abnormal data they investigated earlier. They receive an IFF signal and follow it to a fleet floating above the water. Communication with the fleet has them be accused of stealing the beacon and corrosion, and a fight ensues. Princeton Meta arrives and stops the fighting, bringing them aboard before leaving to a chat with one Silver Fox. After their chat, a black tornado, now known as a corrosion entity, appears, as well as some sirens. The two infight while the fleet mops up the stragglers. Back on the floating battleship, Constellation and Silver Fox play a game asking each other a series of questions. The beacon is repaired and the Sea of Stars fleet head back home, reuniting with the regular Princeton. Elsewhere, Arbiter the Lover's 6 begins an attritional battle with Bonhob Richard. Observer gives Akagi crucial information regarding an Orochi plan. In the Iris Orthodoxy, talks have begun on reforming the Azur Lane. Outside, the commander is contacted by Helena Meta, who informs him of a rigging-enhancing crystals found in Antarctica, and a larger EU fleet that is headed there led by Saratoga. He leaks his intel to Ironblood and Northern Parliament. Soyuz herself leads a fleet to Antarctica, arriving at their research station where she touches their large crystal SAM, restructuring her hull and malfunctioning rigging. They receive intel that Ironblood has been attacked by mysterious entities, and check in at Ironblood's installation before venturing out to a secret doomsday bunker built in collaboration between the two nations. Inside, they find out one of its production lines is responsible for the crystals and the melting snow. They head for the data center to find out who is responsible, passing a strange art gallery along the way. At the data center, Soyuz dissociates and sees Observer's mainframe. She is attacked by her tentacles but notices Observer's SOS message. She suspects a trap and orders a retreat from the continent. Meanwhile, the commander monitors the situation with a little help from Helena Meta. Soyuz is brought to an illusion created by Parmiat Mercuria Meta of her Elysium of the past. With her suspicions now confirmed, she rejects Parmiat Meta's fantasy, declaring her an enemy as gazers burst forth beneath the Antarctic ice. Soyuz sends retreat orders to all shipgirls stationed on the continent before getting a call from the commander. She fills him in on the situation and he begins to take charge. In response to the devolving crisis, the commander converts a tribunal base into a temporary command centre and contacts Bismarck, who gives him control authority of Ironblood's fleets for this and all future battles. He calls Saratoga, reassuring her that they will save Lexington, and takes command of her fleet too. They, combined with the Royal Navy's Southern Ocean Fleet and the forces stationed in Antarctica, do battle with Parmiat and her gazers, getting the upper hand. As they do, Parmiat connects to the Essence, fragments of past Parmiats, and even attacks the commander directly using a black mist. He and Soyuz find themselves in a void with a door, being shown the past lives of Parmiat, and meeting the concept of her. She recognises him from somewhere. Back in the waking world, the battle is wrapping up. Akagi begins to put her plan in motion, and the Northern Parliament takes in Kirov Meta. After more conferences, the commander returns to his accommodation, to find a strange girl on his bed, after getting stuck in his and Helmet's conversation space. She leads him to Richelieu and Queen Elizabeth, who tasks him with taking this Miss D here to find her whale, an enormous arbiter rigging and database, so they may gain intel on their true enemy, the X. He is assigned a protection fleet from the Irish Orthodoxy, and they travel using Queen Elizabeth Meta's train to a spatial impact site. Once there, they use the train cars to anchor the concept of death to draw out the retreating whale. Quetta identifies two unknown groups and leaves to investigate. While she does, the fleet is attacked by Death's shadow. They retreat through the unfolded car into the Martyrium. While passing between life and death, on the way there, the commander gets a lecture on how death works for Kansen, and how it's not truly an end for them. In the Martyrium, the fleet meets Wichita and Kimberly Meta of the Ashes, agreeing to a temporary ceasefire. The concept is further reinforced as the devil attacks the whale, causing it to retreat again. In the next layer, they find themselves on Samos, before a growing conflict between the Oceanic Federation and Revolutionary Front, over a false flag attack and Laplace's demon, a time machine. A team known as Flare, later to become the Ashes, was sent to steal it, but everything changed when the first corrosion entities appeared. Commander chooses to stay behind and see how things end while everyone else tries to escape. Between life and death, he meets Rodney. She questions his actions, and he lays out his resolve, being shown his end, seemingly catching her interest. He is dragged into another memory space, this time aboard a floating battleship in the midst of a losing battle against the X. He turns it around and a Class 9 mimic beast appears, and Miss D urges the commander to flee with her, but he stands his ground and is saved by Rodney, who alters this space to conform to his will, and he sees his fleet fighting Death's Shadow in the Martyrium. He merges the two, inducing a partial awakening, allowing them to defeat the X and the Shadow, as he returns to chase the whale. Hatakaze Meta reveals herself, and her plan to rebirth Rodney as a godlike being within this space. She instead creates a construct of her with immense power. The fleet fights the Meta while the Ashes, Quetta and the newly arrived Helmet deal with the Devil and Rodney. As the battle rages, Commander contacts Meta about Rodney, and she has her resculpt herself as a Meta, bringing the fight to an abrupt end. Miss D and Quetta go after the Whale and Devil. The Commander and the Iris Girls head home. The Ashes depart, and Helena helps clean up, and actually shares some information when asked for once. Commander receives word of an incident in the Pacific. Strasbourg has a nightmare of the Orthodoxy in flames. She is awoken by her comrades in order to prepare for an upcoming event. Commander gets invited to the Peace Interlude, a multinational naval exercise held between the European powers at Mount St. Michael, with the goal of establishing an alliance between them in case the reformation goes south. At the event, he converses with Bismarck, who floats the idea of potential cooperation with the Sirens against the Ect. Strasbourg asks him about her nightmares, with him drawing parallels to strange happenings in the Pacific, and consults Shinano. Strasbourg has another nightmare, this time about Mirz el-Kabir, until a woman resembling a Margi inserts herself to save them. The day repeats with a number of minor differences, but the commander notices the discrepancies and tries to make heads or tails of what's happening. No one seems to notice or remember the original events of the previous day, just the dream. But he is able to wake Shinano by reminding her of a Watatsumi-made amulet. He sends her off to go wake Clemenceau and prepare for what's to come, while being whisked away to the Dragon Emperor. Meanwhile, Bismarck and Clemenceau awaken on their own. Saratoga succumbs to the dream, and Shinano uses her dream powers to temporarily awaken Marco Polo from her coma, who bonks this Margi, sparing the Sardinians. Over in the Pacific, Indiana's fleet on the Samoan Islands are expecting a Sakura delegation led by a Margi. Instead, they are greeted by Shimanto, who shatters the illusion they find themselves in. A Margi and her corrosion entities attack but are driven off. Indiana and her fleet give chase to Kiritomati, armed with some talisman gifted by Shimanto. They break into the illusion of the attack on NY, reminding Dewey and Aylwin of what truly happened that day, before driving off a Margi once more. Reclaiming the island, they make contact with Enterprise's fleet and plan their next course of action. Using Fargo's drones, they deliver the talismans across the Pacific in order to wake up Eagle Union bases from this dream. As this happens, Parmiat Meta heads for Antarctica again, as her island paradise vacation comes to an abrupt end. Further drones are sent to Sydney and Tierra del Fuego. Sarah awakens from her own tragic dream, thanks to Dream Lexington's help, and works on breaking the illusion in the Eagle Union mainland. Meanwhile, the EU fleets mobilise to stop the corrosion entities heading from the Marshall Islands and save the Sakurans trapped on the Solomon Islands. Nagato and her fleet are attempting to escape a barrier domain of the sacred Sakura. They investigate said tree at its core. There she realises what Akagi is trying to do. Enterprise's fleet breaks into the domain and rescues them, and they form an alliance to end this illusion across the Pacific. Elsewhere, Tessa observes the build-up of forces and computing power in the Dragon Emperor. She attempts to raise the intensity of her storm to combat this, but is unable for some strange reason, so she resolves to deploy higher-spec mass production units. The DE launches its attack, led by the commander, firing saturation attacks of freezing cluster rockets to destabilise the storm and beat back the Sirens until Tessa appears with a number of her own vessels. They push her back too. Having received intel on the situation in both the Pacific and Europa, the commander locks in and begins 2 concurrent operations. He will lead the Dragon Emperor fleet, with support from the Royal Navy, Iron Blood and relocated Northern Parliament, to attack Testa's Mariana's stronghold, while Enterprise leads her fleet to take the Marshall Islands. There they find an illusion of the Prime Sakura, an unconscious Ryujo, alongside Sakura's submarines. Nagato goes to destroy the false Prime to stop it feeding power outside, confronting a Margi and questioning who she truly is. The two do battle and the rest of the fleet arrives to back her up. Nagato recognises this fake Amagi as the shadow of corruption. It tries to take her, but gets Hiei instead. They regroup with the commander's fleet and the reinforcements, and begin their assault on the stronghold. Following the siege, Testa's mainframe lay exposed. However, the fake Amagi appears and hijacks it, giving birth to a corrosive storm and a horde of doppelgangers. Still, they are no match for the fleet, who disperses the storm and cleaves through the horde towards the mainframe. But it's all for naught, as fake Amagi gloats her victory and seals the mirror sea containing the mainframe. A cataclysmic singularity appears over the Sakura Empire, dubbed Naraka by TB. Over in Europa, the conceptual weapon developed by Shinano and Clemenceau is used to awaken the rest of the girls from the illusion. A strange uptick in activity from the NA Ocean singularity is noticed. During this whole crisis, Suikaku raises suspicion of Nagato's redeployment and stays home to investigate. With the aid of Zuiho, she eavesdrops on Akagi and Musashi's plans to revive Amagi. That night, she dreams of their freeing of Nagato, but with Amagi in the latter's place. Suikaku is awakened by Zuiho to a crisis. Akagi's ritual and the ensuing corrosion is spreading out of control. Musashi orders her to stop, but she refuses. Back with the Zuis, their fleet is attacked by Junyo and Hiyo Meta. They knock them out and have Yamashiro purge the corrosion. Jinsu explains what's going on, and Suikaku goes to round 2 of eavesdropping, returning with her intel and gearing up with many charms and talismans that Zuiho has been gifted over the years. Suikaku catches up with Musashi within the ritual's barrier, and the latter lays out the plan. She is going to use the decisive weapon she developed with Jinsu Meta to tear holes in the ritual barrier that is now fused with the prime barrier that protects the Sakura Islands as a distraction, while Zui with her many stacked buffs goes after Akagi. Outside, Mikasa leads a fleet to drive off the monsters spawned by the ritual, so the Sakurans can get their protective barriers set up. She charges off ahead to protect the rest of the fleet, and along with an exhaustive Musashi, is saved by golden butterflies. Amagi's soul still lacks the proper nourishment, and Akagi prepares to sacrifice herself and Kaga to complete it. But Kaga saves her, being sacrificed alone. Akagi breaks and gives up, after sacrificing her sister to fail in reviving her original sister, but is saved from the monsters by Zuikaku and some outside help. Nagato convinces her that with the commander's help, this can all still be fixed. Helmet takes the commander to a meeting with Observer, where she strong-arms her into helping them revive Amagi in exchange for her continued existence and the safety of the other low-level programs. All remaining mainframes explode, taking the Crown Singularity with them. Cloaked by Helmet, Observer connects to the Siren's natural calculation systems, and creates a world segment within Naraka of a time when Amagi was alive. After a pep talk with Akagi, the commander enters Naraka with Zuikaku, Ryuho and Akagi in tow, leaving Enterprise in charge of keeping the corrosion entities from leaking out. Nagato undergoes a temporary metamorphosis, and along with Jinsu and Kazumi Meta, enters the Singularity in order to purge the amalgamations and release Amagi's concept. Over in the Atlantic, the European factions begin to mobilise against the North Atlantic Singularity and the monsters spewing from that. In Naraka, Hiei, now a Meta, wanders before finding Hatakaze being attacked. She jumps in to save her and is directed towards her allies by the mysterious individual who fears her own power. In the dream world, Shinano travels through gate after gate, witnessing her comrades' ends and collecting their souls. Fuso Meta seeks to bar her path at the end, but her barrier is shattered by the arrival of Unzen. Within the segment, Akagi leads the commander's fleet to Amagi's abode, briefly pausing at a flower viewing spot where the commander questions if she's afraid of meeting her sister, after all the crimes she's committed. She manages to pull herself together and lead them there, being given some space as she tearfully reunites with her sisters, and begs them not to leave her again. After she's got that out of her system, the rest of the fleet begin a meeting. Commander explains that Amagi and Kaga will be retrieved from this segment as souls, and that soul will be used in conjunction with the Watatsumi to recreate their bodies. After explaining how they got to this point, they are informed of strange enemies attacking. They move out to save their allies in this segment, but a new enemy shows up, kidnapping Akagi. Retreating, they are joined by Shinano and informed this segment is unstable. They need to revive them now lest their souls get corrupted. They go about it using Amagi's soul data, Shinano's amulet, and the natural calculation system to affix the concept of Amagi's carrier retrofit to her soul. She is revived without the hull defect. Meanwhile, the Meta fleet search for Naraka for the amalgamations. Nagato taps into her counterpart's power and locates them. The false Amagi comes, and Nagato sees that she is merely Akagi's obsession given form. Hiei arrives and attacks her, causing her to manifest her own concept as Akagi Meta, carrying the souls of her sisters. They call for a ride out and Camelot appears. Akagi Meta stands before her counterpart and lays into her, exposing her innermost feelings, before trying to take over. The Commander's fleet enters a world segment created by Testa's mainframe, and gets attacked by Akagi Meta. Amagi takes charge with her Sakuran brethren to pacify Akagi, and her disguise falls. In her big sister's arms she confesses her sins, and her desire to disappear along with them. Amagi brings her back to her senses. Since all the active singularities are connected, they resolve to escape through the NA Ocean singularity, while Enterprise's fleet destroy Naraka. Outside, everyone is still holding on, just barely, but here Yumeta brings some good news. The Ashes are coming. Observer can no longer hide and self-destructs her mainframe. Bonhomme Richard is stalled by an illusion of test site beta. The end, this is not. That's another year of Azur Lane in the books, and I gotta say, it's been a good year for Azur Lane's story. Since the start of 2024, we've had a clear through line of how it will take more than conferences and a common enemy to reform the Alliance, instead of just some background stuff building up as we schizophrenically jump around. And with how every event this year's had international cooperation in some way, I'd say we're well on our way. Everyone seems pretty happy to fight for the Commander. The greater focus on the Commander as the main character certainly helps as well. Normally he'd only get an event or two a year, but this time around he's in almost all of them, and it helps make following it so much easier. We're left off in a rather awkward place though. Simultaneously in a major paradigm shift with the removal of the mainframes, and a return to the pre-Akagi Summer Shitfest status quo, with the Commander in Europa negotiating the reformation of Azur Lane. Despite how it feels though, we did end on what is essentially a flowery to be continued. So this reforging the Alliance arc is not done yet. So where are we going from here? Well, in the near term, Naraka still needs to be dispersed, and something tells me that's easier said than done. Also there's this whole NA singularity and the Arbiters within it, plus the Ashes arriving, probably dumping Friedrich's group back in our timeline in the process. They've been talking up Sardinia a lot lately, with them mobilising damn near their entire navy to the NA. Who knows, maybe the December UR event and wrap-up of all this will be theirs. Bonhomme Richard is here too. Not much change on that front really. With the sirens out of the way, I wonder, who will we be fighting next? Tune in next time for that. And on that note, I'll see you guys then. Fair winds and following seas.